Hi everyone. I like she mentioned, I'm Christy Floyd with the Department of Ecology. I'm going to be talking a little bit about our statewide Watershed Health Monitoring Project. This is a long-term study that started in 2009, collecting a variety of data with goals to report status and trends of Washington's rivers and streams. And today I'll be giving a little bit of background on the project, as well as highlighting a couple of our reference sites that happen to fall in the national parks. For the next slide, to start out, we divide our sites into 3 different categories. The top 2 in red and orange here are defined as our reference sites. These are low or minimally impacted sites that help us set standards for what we deem as healthy throughout the state. And so the red sentinel sites are visited annually, and along with helping us set standards, they also track year-to-year variation. For example, if there's a really warm summer. And then the orange or ambient biological monitoring sites, these are sampled every 2 to 4 years, a little bit wider spread. We have about 100 of these sites, and they also, again, help us set those standards. But the good chunk of our sites are all of the blue points on this map, are randomly selected sites. We have just shy of 700 sites sampled so far, and these are designated using a GERTS survey design and allow us to do analysis on a regional and a statewide scale. On the next slide, if we go a little bit more into the randomly selected sites, we rotate and sample 50 sites in each of these salmon recovery regions, moving to a new region each summer. We've done 2 laps around the state so far, working on our 3rd. This next summer, we'll be headed to the Mid-Columbia region and are looking forward to finishing out our 3rd round and be able to show some larger trends once that's all finished up. And next slide, to explain a little bit of the data we collect. It's a lot. We have a lot going on. We spend about a full day at each one of those sites, sampling everything from habitat and riparian to presence absence of fish, measuring channel dimensions, collecting samples for water, periphyton, chemistry, as well as benthic macroinvertebrates are another really important one. And on the next slide, to share some larger trends that we've seen so far, just within those two sampling rounds. We have a graph here showing BIBI metrics, which, for those that don't know, that's the benthic index of biological integrity, which measures the diversity of sensitive benthic taxa. It is a great scoring system for stream health, and we are able to use our reference sites to create 3 different categories: good, fair, and poor. And from these first 2 rounds, you can see we're just shy of half of the stream length statewide is in the good category, and just shy of a third is in the poor category. And this is something we're excited to add to, especially when we get that 3rd round and can see some larger trends. And on the next slide, while BIBI is a great indicator of stream health, it doesn't necessarily tell us why a stream is healthy or unhealthy. It doesn't pinpoint any one thing. So we also look at a variety of what we're naming stressors. These are measurable characteristics of streams, and when they're in poor condition, they can have a larger impact on biological communities. So there's a lot going on in the graph here, but again, this is our 2 rounds of sampling indicated, as well as a percentage of stream kilometers in poor condition. And so I just want to highlight 2 larger groupings here, one related to substrates. So if we start at the top of this graph, we've seen around 70% of stream kilometers showing poor bed stability, which is related to also to 2 down with this red star next to it. A high percentage of sand fines. We have about 50% of stream kilometers in that category as well. And those 2 poor conditions within those categories show that we have a lot of substrate moving downstream, which means less habitat for fish and inverts, and overall degrading stream quality. And that category in itself is probably one of the biggest impacts we've seen towards stream health. But another category to draw attention to is water chemistry. Just rounding up here, we have about 50% of streams with high nitrogen, 40% of streams with low dissolved oxygen, and around 35% of streams with high water temp. These are all likely due to human or eventually climate change impacts, and metrics that, again, with the nature of this long-term study, we're excited to continue to track and to continue to show some bigger trends as we collect more data. So on the next slide, well, all of those big trends are really important. This symposium is geared more towards national parks, so we wanted to highlight a few of our reference sites within those boundaries. We have 2 within the Olympic National Park and 1 within Mount Rainier National Park. I want to make a small shout out here saying if anybody in the North Cascades National Park knows of an accessible and minimally impacted stream up in the North Cascades, we would love to add it to our biological ambient site list. We're always looking to add some in there, but I'll make that small note and then continue on. In the next slide, I just want to highlight 2 of our sentinel sites. So Laughingwater in Mount Rainier National Park and Twin Creek in Olympic National Park. Just to briefly touch on some data we've seen from those. In the next slide, I have 2 graphs here showing water temperatures over the years for these 2 sites. So we have the orange points on top being Twin and on bottom being Laughingwater Creek. And the blue points representing the randomly selected sites within their regional rotation. And you can see both of these streams have consistently low water temperatures. They're really great and continue to house healthy populations of coho salmon for Twin Creek and cutthroat salmon for Laughingwater Creek. And on the next slide, even though we have those really low water temperatures, we have another stressor that is displaying some interesting data for these 2 sites. So we have Laughingwater as these blue points and Twin Creek as these green points. The yellow dashed line on this graph indicates the cutoff for a fair designation, and the red dashed line indicates cutoff for poor designation. So you can see both of these sites started out being in the good category for a percentage of sand fines, but they're creeping up higher and higher into the fair and poor categories. We're not exactly sure why this is, but it is an interesting trend to note, especially since these sites are off the beaten path, don't have too much influence, but they're experiencing the same stressor that we're seeing throughout a lot of our state as well. And if we go to the next slide, this is something that we're not just seeing in Twin and in Laughingwater. It is also amongst a lot of our other sentinel sites. A high percentage of sand fines is not going to be good for salmon and invert health, and something we want to keep an eye on. Yeah, these increasing numbers we're curious about and we'll want to keep an eye on, but in the nature of a long-term study, we're just going to keep looking and keep seeing. And I just wanted to finish out here. I think I might be a little bit quick. On the next slide, we have, I just wanted to do a shout out that we collect all this data and have a lot of help from seasonal staff. So if you know anyone early in career that would be interested in helping us out with some stream surveys, we desperately need seasonal technicians, and we have that job posting coming out around the end of January. So if you know anyone interested, we encourage you to keep an eye on careers.wa.gov and encourage them to apply. And I think I finished up a little bit earlier than planned, so I can take any questions folks might have.
That's always a great problem to have. Thanks for that great presentation.
No problem.
Yeah, and we have time for questions if anybody has any they want to put in the chat or raise their hand and ask. I think this system of having the baseline modeling is really interesting. Do you have thoughts about what to do if you lose some of these quality sites? Do you reference back in time, or
Yeah, well, the idea is we have those biological ambient sites that there's over 100 of those right now. So we will consistently have that data to pull from. But it is a concern because the definition for those reference sites are that they're minimally impacted, and it is getting harder and harder to find streams that fall within that category. So it might end up being lesser impacted or best available sites that end up making that list. And that's going to be what helps us set those standards. It's not ideal, but that is a little bit of the reality of what we might have to end up doing. But it is really nice having those national park sites because those are decently reliable sites that will continue to have and continue to be in reasonably good condition.
Yeah, here's hoping. And Ty asks in the chat, have you looked at macro invert trends at the sites?
Is it Laughingwater and Twin? Is that, I'm guessing, specifically what they're asking?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Both of those sites have really good scores. Okay, perfect. He said yes. Both of those have really good scores for BIBI. I can't pull the numbers off the top of my head, but that is why they have been in our Sentinel designation, because they have continued to have high scores. So it's interesting that we're seeing the percent SANS fines being increasing in those sites, but something we want to keep an eye on because it could tend towards lower BIBI scores eventually.
And Robert asks, is your water quality data currently available on the Ecology's water quality portal?
It is on the EIM, which is our environmental information management system. We have all of our data, associated habitat metrics, chemistry, all of that data is available and free to the public. I can drop a link for that. It's wherever that should go. But yeah, we encourage other people to use our data. We have a large swath of it, and would love for other people to find a use for it as well.
Great. And then Kim asks, do you take water temperature in Twin Creek near the bridge? They also monitor water temperature at 2 locations in Twin Creek, and the water is much cooler near the bridge compared to a mile or so upstream.
Okay, interesting. I believe the bridge that they're referring to is the one right after you enter the park over Twin, and we collect, I believe it is maybe just under a mile upstream of that bridge. So it's interesting. We haven't collected data at multiple points, but it is upstream of that location. So it would be interesting to compare data with what you guys have collected.
Do we have any more questions? All right. Thanks, Christy. Thank you so much for your talk. I think that's really interesting.
Thank you.
And it's great to see some of those sentinel sites at the parks.